Hi, I'm Paul Feiner. I'm the Greenburgh Town Supervisor.
I'm Pauline Mosley. Welcome to our show today.
And we have a really interesting guest today. Our guest is Natalie Barry, and she's with the Hastings Historical Society. And they're one of the best historical societies anywhere. And maybe you could tell us a little bit about yourself and why you got involved in the society and about the society.
Well, I had been involved with the PTSA in Hastings, and my son graduated. So once he graduated high school, that was a while ago, I was kind of looking for something else to do on a volunteer basis. I went to an exhibit at the Hastings Historical Society on maps, and I was fascinated. Ran into one of my neighbors who was involved at the society and expressed my gratitude and interest, and she said, you should stop by. And that was the beginning of my starting my involvement with the Historical Society. And that was about 10 years ago now.
Wow.
That is great. How many people are involved?
I would say, so we're open on Mondays and Thursdays from 11 to 2 every week, also the first Saturday of every month in the afternoon. So the people who come on a weekly basis, there's maybe 10 or 12 of them, and they do a lot of the work, signing up members, sending out merchandise, doing form letters, doing basic research, answering phones, that kind of thing. But then we have another cadre of volunteers, maybe another 10, who help us with mailings. We have a newsletter that we put together 4 times a year. That has to be mailed out. Membership notices have to be mailed out. So we have probably 25 or 30 altogether who are involved. We also have some people who work full-time and are either trustees or volunteers on their own time. So
Right. So what is the mission of the historical, just for our viewing audience?
it's to preserve the rich history of our village. We have an interesting history. It's artistic. It's also industrial. We have a lot of notable residents who lived in our village.
Like
Well, let's see, Jacques Lipschitz, the sculptor. A couple that's had a lot of attention and is listed in your Black History Museum panels is Doctors Mamie and Kenneth Clark. They were civil rights activists and psychologists, and there's been a lot of attention on them lately.
And Hastings, I think, has had more Nobel Prize winners than any place in the world, I think.
We've had a lot. We've had a couple of homegrown ones that went through the school system, and then we had quite a few that lived there because of the proximity to Columbia University, because it's an easy commute to Columbia.
I remember when I first ran for office, this was over 40 years ago, I ran for county legislator, and I knocked on somebody's door. Dr. Rainwater. And I knew that I was knocking on his door, but he talked to me for 45 minutes, and then I went to tack like this was just spontaneous. I said, your name sounds familiar. He said, oh, I won the Nobel Prize. He lived on High Street, I think.
Oh, I don't know.
I remember the conversation because he was so modest. And Hastings is sort of like the intellectual capital. Some communities are known for different things. Hastings is known for the brain power. You have to have a high IQ.
Oh, that's funny. And we've had a lot of artists and literary people. So it's an interesting mix of industry, intellectual capabilities, civil rights. We had an early integrated black and white neighborhood from 1939 until now. I mean, it's more, fewer black families live there as the neighborhoods in the areas have integrated. But we have a very interesting history.
Oh, yeah, my first campaign manager, Phil Weiser, he managed my campaign when I first ran for supervisor, then clerk for Justice Ginsburg. Now he's the Attorney General of Colorado, and he's a front runner. He's probably going to be elected in November, Colorado governor. And he lived in Hastings, and I remember knocking on his door. But Hastings is sort of like interesting also because so much happened in the 1960s.
Right.
And
right.
you have an amazing exhibit about the 1960s.
What life was like, yeah.
Well, life was like, And could you tell us a little bit about the exhibit and how long the exhibit's going to be open for?
Okay. So the exhibit came out of an article that one of our volunteers wrote about 2 years ago. Kimberly Janeway, who joined us several years ago. She has a background in newspaper reporting, and she decided to do an article about life in Hastings in the 60s, and that was really well received. So when we were coming up with an idea for our annual exhibit, we said, why don't we explore life in the 60s in greater detail and really like blow out, you know, the political scene, the cultural scene, the arts, what it was like in the schools, just kind of lots more detail than her article. But we used her article as a backbone. And so that's how we came about with that idea. And it's been really well received because there's a lot of people who remember the 60s. So that's been kind of cool. People coming in and recognizing the images and who's in the photographs that we have.
Why do you think so much happened in the 60s? The Hastings Library, I think, it opened in 1966.
Yeah.
The pool in 1964. Why was the 60s a time of
Such change.
excitement in Hastings?
Well, I think some of it had to do with the whole baby boom, you know, because the whole country was experiencing that. So in terms of Hillside School was built. That's our elementary school. Also, the high school gym was built. And part of that was just the schools were exploding. There were so many children that they started running out of room.
Wow,
and that kind of fed into some of the other things. There was no place to go swim, so they built a pool. The library was kind of getting overwhelmed. They needed a library. The supermarket was built, which is not a public thing, obviously, but people needed to shop for their families. The first big supermarket was built.
That's a supermarket that's still there now.
Yes, it was an A&P originally, and now it's Food Town. Yeah.
Right. I'm sort of curious, in terms of like communities, do you find that, you know, what happens, say, in Hastings, there's a lot of growth, probably happens all over a region? Is Hastings usually unique, or is it sort of
a microcosm?
Is it a microcosm? Has that been something that you've ever studied?
We haven't, because I'm so focused on our village.
Right.
But I think that it was similar. I mean, I came from a community in Long Island. I'm not from here originally. And I know our major high school complex was built in the 60s. So some of what I'm talking about was obviously happening elsewhere. Facilities were being upgraded, and people were moving from, like even the grocery store analogy, they're moving from going to little tiny stores and grocers. They needed someplace to buy a lot of things for their family all at once. It was kind of a modernization happening on that end. So the schools were being built, the libraries were being built, pools, you know, so I think we were a little bit of a microcosm.
That's really interesting.
And how long does it take to go through this exhibit? So people could, you know, plan for their day.
Well, I will tell you there's a lot of material, kind of a little more than we expected when we were putting it together. But it's up, we do an annual exhibit, and it opens in November of a given year. So last November we opened the 60s exhibit. It'll be up until October. So there's plenty of time to come back.
That's what I want to know. Okay.
Right, because some people, if you're interested in a particular topic, for example, we have a panel on fashion, you can come in and just read that and that's it. But if you're interested in all of the panels, I would suggest coming back.
Is there an admission fee too?
No.
So it's all free?
It's all free.
So this is really a great opportunity for people who want to do something on a cold winter.
Monday or Thursday though, because we have limited hours. We're all volunteer, so we have to staff it on a volunteer basis.
That's great. How do you get the funding for this?
We're self-funded, so we're funded by memberships and donations primarily. We do sell a little bit of merchandise, so there's a tiny bit of revenue we get from that, but mostly it's memberships.
I see.
Right.
So is it open on the weekends?
The first Saturday of every month between September and June, we're open in the afternoon 2 to 4. So that gives people who work the opportunity to come and visit.
Nice.
Yes.
You know, that is great. Your exhibit also focuses on the Vietnam War
Yes.
because that was
yes.
the 60s.
Yes. So we tried to kind of balance protests and what was going on, you know, in terms of people who were against the war. Plus, there were a lot of people who participated in the war. We had many men who signed up to go. So we tried to do both of those. And we talked a little bit also about what was going on in the schools, mostly the high school, and how the opinions changed from the early part of the 60s to the later part of the 60s.
You know, how did they change?
Well, we had articles from The Buzzer, which is the high school newspaper, and at first it was very supportive of the war, and then you could see the editorials changing as the decade progressed, which was very interesting, which of course I think reflected what was going on in the country as well.
Was Hastings always a progressive community? Because I always say Hastings is like Berkeley and Nyack and Hastings, but it's always been very activist, and I'm wondering if it was
It
like
wasn't
that.
before. In the 50s, it was actually relatively conservative and more of a Republican enclave. And then as there were neighborhoods that were being developed in the 60s, which was part of the whole family and baby boom, and it pulled in a lot more liberal families. So it changed in the 60s.
Do you see any changes in demographics now?
Well, I would say, I don't know about political, I don't think so, but definitely we're pulling in a higher socioeconomic group of people, and that's because of housing prices.
But Hastings is always like a fun. There's something like really special. I lived in Hastings for about a dozen years at 565 Broadway, and I said Hastings to me is like the ultimate. I've always loved it, but it was the only place where there was a contested election. I don't know if you remember that, the school board election, somebody ran unopposed, and guess what? He lost.
No, what year was that, Paul?
Oh, that must
He
have been
lost. Oh, my goodness.
sometime in the 80s.
Oh,
I
it's
will
before my
never-
time.
I will never forget that because I went to the polls like 8:45. I thought, oh, it would take 5 minutes. The lines were 45 minutes long. I had to wait until after like practically after 9:30, 9:45 to vote because they gave everybody a pencil and they organized and the person lost. And I always say that what I like about Hastings is it's democracy in action, and people will speak out and express themselves. And
People
it's like
have
a sport.
everybody has an opinion in
That's
Hastings.
what I have always loved Hastings. Because the people. It's like, to me, the people that make the
the town.
community special. There's no place like it.
I agree. I love my town, my village.
In terms of we talked about the Vietnam War. We talked about the Civil Rights Movement.
Yeah.
And there were a lot. You mentioned some
Clarks.
well-known families that were involved in the Civil Rights Movement.
Yes, and there were others. I mean, we in the panel about the civil rights, we talk about just everyday Hastings residents who were involved and went to Washington and marched and protested, and so it was both the famous people like the Doctors Clark and everyday residents who were involved in civil rights, which is a grassroots thing. As Paul said, people had opinions and they had strong opinions, still do.
And also the environmental movement, is that part of your museum?
It's part of our exhibit. One of our panels is sort of early environmental activism. We talk about the Old Croton Aqueduct and it becoming a state park, and of course we're just a little piece of that. There's also an interesting little vignette about an early electric car from the 60s that was being promoted. So we have a couple of interesting things. And in the exhibit, it's not just panels with words. We have lots of images. We have objects. We put a call out to our members and people who are on our Facebook page saying we're doing an exhibit about the 60s. Do you have any memorabilia? Clothing. Nice. We really wanted clothing. We got a couple of pieces of clothing. I really wanted like go-go boots or something. We didn't get that, but we got a dress and we got a really great man's outfit with like a vest, and it's really cool. We have Vietnam War uniform. We have some Beatles memorabilia that we got from one of our members. She's a big Beatles fan, and a ticket from the Shea Stadium concert.
Oh, that's exciting.
Yeah,
Wow.
albums, Beatle albums. We
Wow.
have some great stuff that people could come and look at. So it's not all words,
have to go
it's
see it.
images and objects
Were
too.
there famous people who didn't live in Hastings but who spoke at events in Hastings?
Well, we have Robert F. Kennedy came to visit Hastings. We have an image of him walking through a doorway of a Hastings house. Trying to think who else I could think of. Martin Luther King came twice to Hastings.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Why was that?
Because of the Clarks. He was friendly with the Doctors Clark. So he came with his wife and young daughter in the 50s and stayed overnight. We believe it's the only overnight visit in Westchester County. Because he
Wow.
did come several
Did he come
times.
to speak,
Wow.
or was it more like a private?
No,
visit?
he was. I believe, and I might have this wrong. He was doing something in the city, and so the Clarks invited him to come and stay with them. And then the second time he came was in the '60s, shortly before his death. There was a meeting at the Clark household in Hastings about, and it was a whole group of civil rights activists who were coming to that meeting. So 2 times in Hastings, both at the Clark's
Wow.
house.
That is
That's
great.
amazing.
I remember when I was starting my career, I had met the Clarks. But they were very down to earth, and I really didn't. To be honest, I didn't really appreciate how important they were in the community. Because when you speak to them, they acted just like everybody else.
Yeah.
They were very modest. Did you know them?
No, I didn't, because it was before I was involved in the Historical Society. And of course, by the time I got here to Hastings, Mamie had passed away. She passed away earlier, before her husband. But to your point about not knowing what they've done, we started a subgroup of the Hastings Historical Society called the Clark Commemoration Project. And 2 years ago in 2023, we had a big commemorative event at the community center in Hastings, where we co-named a portion of Mount Hope Boulevard in our village in honor of the Doctors Clark. And the family came to this event. And I don't know if you know, but Minnie Jean Brown, who was one of the Little Rock Nine, lived with the Clarks for a while.
Oh, wow.
When
wow,
she
I
was,
didn't know that.
so basically she was thrown out of the school in Arkansas because of all of the racial nonsense going on. And she didn't have any place to go finish high school. So through a connection that Mamie had, Mamie Clark was born in Arkansas. So Minnie Jean Brown came and lived with the Clarks. She didn't go to Hastings High School. She went to a private school in Manhattan. But she lived with them for about 2 years. And she's still with us. She's still alive. She came back and spoke to each of the schools in the Hastings
Wow, that's
school district.
incredible.
So the Clark Commemoration Project started with that event and the co-naming event, but now we're working on permanent signage that would honor the Clarks so that
that's
school
wonderful.
children would know who they are, residents would know who they are, and visitors to our village would know who they are.
We're starting an interesting historical initiative in the town. We have the Black History Museum,
Right.
which we talked about, and now we're going to be putting up banners
Yes.
of
Yeah.
well-known historical figures who lived in
each
the town,
village, yeah.
in the town.
Wow.
So
Yeah.
like Cab Calloway lived in Greenburgh,
Yeah.
Roy Campanella,
Right.
Gordon Parks, Mums Mabley.
Right.
So I thought that it's
Yes.
just another initiative.
So I just wanted to ask you, so is their house, the Clark's house, still
It's a private residence.
Oh, so it's not
Yeah,
open
yeah.
for tour, part of the...
No, it's a
Oh,
private
so someone-
residence,
wow.
and it has a small plaque that one of the former owners had put, like on the side of the house. But that was another reason why we
I
thought,
see.
let's do something at the beginning and end of what's now Doctors Mamie and Kenneth Clark Way.
Is that on Pinecrest?
Pinecrest is where they lived. Yeah,
Right, I
it was the historically
I see.
integrated neighborhood. But the street that's co-named links the Farragut complex, which is the middle school and high school, with the elementary school at the top of the hill.
see.
So we thought it was appropriate because
That
they
is
were involved in
beautiful.
Brown versus Board of Education,
Oh.
the desegregation case. Their psychological testing of young black children, called the doll tests, were used as pretty key bits of evidence that discrimination harmed all children, but especially black children.
Wow.
Wow.
Yeah, the exhibit also focuses on rock and roll.
Yes. And we got a lot of information about what was going on in the national scene with all of the rock and roll and the Beatles and the Rolling Stones and everybody else influenced a lot of young kids. So we got a lot of information on local rock bands, and we have one or two recordings of the bands and lots of images of high school bands.
Were there any
Very nice.
Hastings residents who were involved in some of the national rock and roll bands?
Probably, but I don't know what they are. I'm sorry. That's not something that I saw in the exhibit.
Right.
Yeah.
How long does it, when you say we're doing an exhibit and you leave the exhibit up for about a year?
Yeah, 11 months. Yep.
11 months? It must take like an awful long time to curate and plan. How do you go about that?
Well, we usually start in the early spring. So I told you 2 days a week we're open, and we have a key group of volunteers, about 10 or 12 who are there. And one of the things we do besides work is we have a bagged lunch, for about a half hour, and we sit 45 minutes. We sit and talk about some things. So we'll brainstorm in the early spring. What do you think we should do for the next exhibit? And we take a look at what we've done in the last couple of years. If we did something about a famous person, maybe we would do about industry in Hastings. If we did industry, maybe we would do it about a decade. So we try to mix it up. And once we come up with a topic, usually by April or May, we'll come up with a topic, because when school's out in June, we get quite a few student interns that come in, and we kind of want to get them working on it. So our volunteers work on the exhibit, but we also get a lot of participation from the students.
Do you have your next exhibit?
No.
You haven't thought
No,
of it
it's
yet?
too early. We
Too
haven't
early,
come
yeah.
up with it yet.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it's usually in the spring.
And what was the exhibit last year?
It was about industry in Hastings, our industrial past, because there were a lot of factories.
Really?
Yeah. So
That's
the early
surprising.
industry was along a ravine, which is behind Main Street in Hastings, where the community center is. If you look in the back of the community center, you see like a stream running
have
through.
seen that, yes.
And that's where the very early industry with water wheels was, like in the early 1800s. And then, of course, when the train came through along the Hudson, the whole Hudson River area boomed, and we had lots of factories and industrial.
Have you ever had an
companies.
exhibit and this could be an idea, if you're looking for ideas, Nobel Prize winners in Hastings?
I think we did like 30 years ago.
Or
We
Pulitzer, was there any Pulitzer Prize winners? I wonder. There must be.
I believe we don't track it like we do Nobel, but I'm sure we have Pulitzer Prize winners.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's
Fabulous.
But that's a good idea.
That is.
Like 30 years ago, I think. So our exhibits used to be much smaller. When we first started, they were in, our municipal building. And I do think we now have a space in the observatory cottage where we're located. It's a round room because it was originally where the telescope was. So we have a lot more space.
that's at Draper Park.
Yes, in Draper Park in Hastings. So we have a lot more space now. And I think over the last 5-6 years, we've gotten a lot more professional, and I think we've also sort of launched into the 21st century because we have QR codes where you can listen to audio, you can watch videos.
Fabulous.
But yeah, so we've been trying to up our game a little bit.
The
with
Draper Park has some historic significance, right?
Yes, yes. So yeah, I was telling Pauline a little bit about it before we started. We're in a building that's originally it was an observatory of the Draper family. It's called the Draper Observatory, and that didn't last for very long because Dr. Henry Draper was the one that was using it as an observatory. He was a doctor at what later became NYU, but his interest was photography, which was taking photographs of celestial objects. And he's known for this really crisp and detailed image of the moon. But he died at a relatively young age, and after his death, the telescopes were given away. And decades later, the house became a residence. The family converted it to a residential building. And it wasn't until the 90s that the Historical Society came, and we're a renter because it's actually a village building.
Oh, that's interesting.
So we're a long-term renter.
And Billy Burke also lived in Hastings.
Yes, she's known as Glinda the Good Witch from The Wizard of Oz. She's one of we have quite a few famous former residents, and she's one of them. People love her, and we've done programs about her, and people come in droves to hear about her.
We only have a minute and a half left of this interview. How do people get involved in the Historical Society, and could you tell us again where the exhibits are?
Okay, so we are located in Draper Park in Hastings-on-Hudson, in the Observatory Cottage, which is a little yellow building. To get involved, well, if you want to help preserve Hastings history, we would love membership, more members. So you can get on our website. We have a lot of really great information on our website. We've got history of the village. We've got the history of the society. So I would suggest people do that.
And I was at an event a couple months ago on Broadway. There's a historical marker near Villard.
Oh, yeah, for the Revolutionary Hastings, about the Battle of Edgar's Lane, that one?
Right.
Yes.
So could you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, so another subcommittee of ours is Revolutionary Hastings, and their goal is to get information out to the public about Hastings' role during the Revolutionary War period. So they put together some historical markers about the Battle of Edgar's Lane, which was a skirmish during the Revolutionary War. And of course, that group's been very involved because we're heading into the 250th anniversary of the signing of the Declaration of Independence.
So George Washington was there?
I don't know about George Washington, but a lot of important stuff happened in our village during the Revolutionary War.
Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thanks so much for joining us.